Welcome to a powerful new chapter of Brothers in Aerospace and Defense, where leadership meets legacy and stories shape the future of an industry that quite literally reaches beyond the horizon.
Today, we're launching the Power and Propulsion series. And this series is really more than just a conversation. It's a spotlight on trailblazers, visionaries, and executives of color who are not only navigating the complexities of aerospace and defense, but also actively redefining what leadership looks like at the highest levels.
Each episode brings you into the room for a candid, one-on-one dialogue, real conversations about the decisions, challenges, and defining moments that shape their journeys. From boardrooms to battle-tested programs, from strategy to execution, we unpack the business of leadership in one of the most critical industries in the world. But this is also about something bigger.
And that something bigger is about representation, and it's about access, and it's about creating a blueprint for the next generation of leaders who are ready to step forward, take ownership, and leave their mark. So whether you're an industry veteran, an emerging professional, or simply someone inspired by stories of resilience and excellence, this series is for you. So let's get into it.
Today, we're doing something different. We're launching our Power and Propulsion series. And this is a series where it's more than a conversation, it's a spotlight on some trailblazers, visionaries, and executives of color who are not only navigating the complexities of aerospace and defense, but actively redefining what leadership looks like at this level. The goal of this podcast is obviously to inspire, educate, and recruit underrepresented talent within aerospace and defense. This podcast is a platform to share personal stories, industry insights, and high-level expertise showing that these careers are attainable and desirable. And so what we're going to do now is going to kick off to Rob, and Rob is going to introduce our esteemed guest.
Thanks, Dwayne. Today we're joined by someone who doesn't just talk about transformation. She's been called into some of the most complex, broken, high-stakes environments in aerospace and aviation, and all the while made them work.
From post-bankruptcy recoveries to scaling operations and supply chains across multiple platforms, Lillian Dutz has operated at the intersection of execution, leadership, and transformation for over 30 years.
And as an owner and chief transformation officer of LAD Consulting, she helps organizations navigate these complexities by strengthening operations, their supply chains, data analytics, and leadership capability to drive overall sustainable growth. Her career also includes senior leadership roles at American Airlines, Beechcraft, Spirit Aerosystems, Atlas Air, and also some other aviation organizations where she led large-scale change through restructures, post-bankruptcy recoveries, and periods of rapid growth. She's really known for bridging shop floor execution with C-suite strategy, and she really brings that depth of expertise in engineering, Lean and Six Sigma, AI-enabled analytics, and also workforce development. So beyond industry leadership, she also serves on multiple boards, teaches as an adjunct professor, and also remains deeply committed to mentoring the next generation of aerospace and aviation leaders. So, Lillian, I wholeheartedly thank you for joining our show. I'm not sure if you want to give any brief introductions of yourself or, tidbits that you want to share with the audience coming into it.
No, listening to that, I'm like, can I meet her? No, I appreciate you guys inviting me into the conversation. So I'm looking forward to sharing what I've learned through the years, what's worked, maybe what's not worked, and seeing where we go from there.
Okay. Thanks, Lillian. So I think we're going to dive right into it. So, the first question is really around, take us into the room, the moment where you walk into an organization that was already broken. We've known all that from my experiences. So not the summary, but what's the feeling? What is happening? What is at risk? And what did you decide within that first 30 days?
Okay. So in one particular instance, when I first walked in, it felt like, any new role, nothing out of the ordinary, get to know people, get to know the new organization. After my initial meeting with the executive leadership and the FAA, the reality surfaced. There was an active potential certificate action that was being threatened by the FAA. Significant fines were tied to surveillance findings, and there was an aggressive timeline that it needed to be fixed. Um, Unfortunately, none of that came up in the interview. So quite a surprise to see all of that sitting on my plate. So unfortunately, some employees didn't know the gravity of the situation. They believed they were doing a good job and couldn't understand why the FAA was doing what they were doing. So in the first 30 days, we had to make some clear decisions, focus on stabilizing things, not necessarily optimization. We needed to regain some credibility with the FAA and focus on what that looked like. We zeroed in on the regulatory compliance accountability. We brought in some talent that had good reputations in the industry to further highlight to them that we were taking their concerns seriously and that we were going to do whatever it took to ensure that things got corrected quickly.
Understanding that you had to really analyze what the real issue was, and then setting a priority of what really needed to be done. What were those things that you ignored in those first 30 days that most leaders are chasing during that time?
Yeah, so we had to be real intentional about what not to chase. It's easy to see low hanging fruit and want to, go after those things that, it's nice and shiny. You get your hands around it really quickly. But it just wasn't a time to focus on optimization, such as cost improvement, full scope reviews, or broad external listening tour with customers and stakeholders. So we stay focused on the most critical issues, especially things that were specifically tied to regulatory risk. Even in the supply chain, we didn't dive fully into evaluations there unless the issue in the supply chain was directly impacting the priorities that we set.
Hmm.
So, but because early on, it's not about doing more, it's about focusing on what matters and stabilizing things first. And that regaining some credibility from the FAA was the utmost importance.
So listeners, it's important as you go through and you look at that 30 days, you really have to see through the experiences that Lillian talked about, is really understand what's really important and prioritize for that, even though understanding that we all want to reach for that low hanging fruit, get those quick wins because we're first there. But you just had to set the precedent, that understanding that this making sure we get the credibility back is the number one thing, and there's nothing else that we need to worry about in the beginning. We'll get to those things. Right now it's all about keeping building and growing that credibility with your end customer, and in this case the FAA, which can shut down everything.
Some of the things we realized by bringing in that external expertise was there was a knowledge level that wasn't within the organization that was causing some of the issue. So by taking that expertise and shoring up the team with a greater level of knowledge around the regulatory requirements, that helped us to start identifying where the challenges were and what needed to be done.
Yeah, so it seems like you're an advocate for getting kind of that outside expertise in-house to really give a new set of eyes to problems that might have been glossed over by existing personnel from the company. Seems like that's really, really useful for getting that the first 30 days and the North Star understood and building up behind that.
It does help, and I think initially employees may be a little resistant to that because it feels like you're saying they don't know how to do their job. And it's just trying, like you say, take that outside look, someone who's not involved in the day to day, someone who's not maybe biased by the system, and can offer some other perspectives about what needs to be done.
We're just learning this right there. One question in, and we just got some real tidbits, man. I'm excited about this. Rob, what's next on the agenda? What's the next question for Lillian? What you got?
Yeah, so I think this next one is around transformation. So that's the next major section. When you walk into that underperformance, what are some of the non-obvious signals that tell you the system is the problem versus the leadership?
For me, things like noticing a lot of rework, noticing a lot of manual processes. If you come into situations, you have a lot of outdated technology. Those all give clear indications that something is lagging. It may not be completely broken, but it could be causing employees to have to work a lot harder to get the work done. As you talk to the employees that are doing the work, they are pretty open about what makes their job difficult and what things that they think they're doing that makes no sense. And there's a better way of doing it. So I typically do a lot of listening of the people that are doing the work from the shop floor throughout the organization to start to put together a picture of what's really going on.
And knowing that when you're having those interviews, right, across, up and down, the value stream, particularly with the people who actually add the value to the work with hammers and nails and screws and screwdrivers, right, and wrenches, and then you go up the chain. What happens when you realize that the signal is not necessarily a system problem? It's a leadership problem. And then how do you address that without breaking the organization even further?
Well, I think when you realize it's a leadership issue, you start to have to slow down and be deliberate about what you do. You don't want to be too quickly about making snap decisions about individuals' capability, especially if you're just coming into the organization. So you start with honest assessments. You do make sure you have the right people in the right roles. Are they overextended? Are they aligned with culture you're building? And the one I really missed one time was I had a key leader that in addition to the departments he was in charge of, we added a special project. And on paper, that looked great. And from my perspective, it seemed to be working well. He never complained or anything, but his employees started to complain. And what happened was he was overstressed in what he was trying to do. It was showing itself in the way he was treating his employees. And so they came to me and said, we can't take this anymore, to describe what was going on. And we had a conversation with the group to let them, put them in a safe environment that they could share with him what they were experiencing. And he really took it to heart. He did not realize that's how he was behaving. We kind of let them go. He and I talked more, and I had to take somewhat a pretty drastic step there because the project he was assigned to was more important than his role running the organization at that time. So I decided to bring in a temporary individual to run his department so he could focus on the project. He was very nervous about that. He thought, he wasn't going to get, he was being demoted. He was going to lose, his responsibilities. So I really had to reinforce with him that was clearly not the case. So he focused on the project. I had someone else run his departments, or at least one or two of his departments, while he was engaged in that. And when he finished, we gave him back his responsibilities. He did great on the project. He did better in managing his organization, but it was what was needed at the time to ensure the project was going to be successful, he was going to be successful, and that his employees were in an environment that was not overbearing to them.
No, that's a great strategy to use. I mean, it's hidden on multiple layers, where you're looking at some of the EQ for him specifically to, how he's coming across as employees and really helping to motivate them to do more and better under his leadership, but also letting him really dedicate his main focus. So it's not like he's trying to split the two babies of his organization, but also this, important project for the leadership and the company.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing for employees to step up and do
Mhm.
because they fear retaliation. So it really takes some time and getting in a relationship with them where they trust that it's going to come out well for them. They're not going to be punished for elevating what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, coming with building that right culture for the organization too.
Right.
But I know you've seen in your time period of transformations that worked, and then some that didn't. What's something that leaders you really think this transformation, but is really just activity on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, you're right there. What I've seen of things is like rolling out new tech, AI, ERP system dashboards, without changing the behavior and the decision making that goes around it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not transformation.
Right.
It's just a more expensive way to get the work done. One critical mistake so many organizations make, they're so anxious to implement technology. They don't want to do the work of mapping out the processes to make sure the processes change in conjunction with the new technology. You also see organizations that they have initiative overload. They have so many projects and meetings, but no real impact in terms of results. Um, they do reorganizations. You move boxes around on your org chart without changing the work that actually gets done. And that doesn't move the needle either. At the end of the day, if metrics are tracking activity instead of outcomes, you get outcomes instead of transformating. You're just staying busy. And I'll give you a clear one. It, if you think about a manufacturer who rewards line movement, so I'll give you a bonus when every time the line moves, the production line moves. If that reward is not balanced with the quality of what moved, then you just have activity. It's just a transaction. So you've got to balance those things to ensure that you're getting the results that you really want.
We all have experienced that, and all our experiences of you get one new logo that kicks in, or one new word, or one new fun acronym that we all go use, and it's the same thing that you did before. Or to your point, culturally, you're not necessarily really addressing the change in the behaviors and the process that you want to see to create that change, because the culture is going to eat that transformation up, right?
In some instances, the harder part of the say like a technology transformation is the change management of the people involved, not necessarily implementing the technology.
Absolutely. I've dealt with so many of, even doing, M&As, which has happened. You just so focused on that synergy plan. You say, hey, we're going to do this great thing and create this new word, and here you go. Or we're going to go implement a new ERP system, to your point. And instead of having one big problem, you got two big problems, because you got two new cultures who don't know how this is going to behave like they did before. And the behaviors and the all the things it just haven't been addressed in that process. And so it definitely causes some turmoil. So let's switch it up a little bit. And we talked about, what transformation, but you've operated from the shop floor all the way up to the boardroom, right? And particularly when you think about transformation, where do most executives lose that connection with the reality of what they're trying to transform, and what does that cost them, and where have you seen that?
I think most executives lose connection when they get pulled too far away from the work. Spend a lot of time in meetings, spend a lot of time away from where the work is getting done. and they start relying on filtered information. And I've seen some people create some great PowerPoint decks that tell a story that simply isn't true. The cost is real. You miss early warning signs. You make decisions without context, and then you start solving the wrong problem. So staying connected is crucial. The people doing the work see what's really happening, and if you're not listening, you're leading in the dark.
I mean, I think that's to the point where a lot of companies are pushing more on-site work these days because they want the leadership there where the product is actually being built or manufactured because you have that line of sight. And you get to engage the people that are doing the day-to-day jobs that if you're off-site or in a different city or state, then you lose touch a little bit with some of the day-to-day workers that if you're not there, you really aren't truly engaging the company, the culture, and the work being done.
Yeah, and to that point, for individuals that lead large enterprise-wide operations, they have got to make it a point to go to the different sites. Because if, say, you're at one location, you have 4 other sites, and those individuals hardly see you, they start feeling like stepchildren.
Mm,
So you've got to still engage with all parts of that operation on a regular basis.
yeah, absolutely. And then piggybacking off of that, what do you think is one assumption about aerospace supply chains is really just wrong from a lot of people these days?
Say how you feel, Rob.
Well, there hasn't been so much talk about supply chain since the pandemic, and the conversation is not going away. Um, I think, started out thinking once the pandemic was over, the disruption was temporary. We get out of it, we move on, and we recover from it, return to steady state, and that's just not true anymore. We're seeing instead disruption is more structural than cyclical. Um, Demand is permanently outpacing supply chain capacity. Aircraft shortages are expected to persist well into the next decade. Critical suppliers like engines, castings, fasteners continue to be single point failures. Labor, not just materials, now a primary constraint. 65% of companies still report workforce shortages. Demand from the defense segment are now directly competing with commercial aerospace for the same supply base. So, a clear signal, even today, OEMs are still missing delivery targets because key components aren't available. So it's here. The disruption is here to stay. We need to learn to manage it more effectively.
Yep, and then add on top of that tariffs nowadays too. So that's
Yes.
another wrinkle in the system.
When you think about it, when you talked about the push on both commercial and defense side of aerospace, right, particularly in the jet engine market, which I've had some intimate knowledge in, right? It never and it's only maybe 3 jet engine players in the world, right, that can do pretty much all the type of aircraft that's out there, right? It's only maybe
Yeah.
3, right? And so because of that,
Yeah.
right, and because of over time there has been a lot of M&As, a lot of things that basically concentrated all the effort. Now we're paying the price for that making these huge stovepipes, just not even thinking about it, just because you're like, hey, we're getting more market share, we're getting more share from that perspective, and it's having a ripple effect from a future perspective, and you just and it's like throughout any critical capability or even supplier that's needed out there, they all have the same story. We used to be company X and company Y and company Z. We came together. Now we just one company. So we got the share, but now we didn't think about the scale, right? And so now we're trying to scale way behind, and it's absolutely
Exactly.
gonna be we got to do it's a macro problem now outside of industry itself.
We were in a position because of a lack of parts to overhaul the engines. We were tearing down excess engines
Right.
to gain parts from those, recertifying the parts and using them in our overhauls. So the situation has gotten pretty tight.
Absolutely. So let's switch up to not just we talked high level, as far as being in the moment, and talked about transformational things and supply chain. Let's talk about just get into the talent and people type questions, if you don't mind. And particularly, we're going to go to all of us are
Okay.
engineers, either by default. we can't help ourselves, and um, and and Rob, I'm gonna take this question if that's okay. Like, what did you have to unlearn when you moved from being an engineer to an executive?
I thought about that, and I'm not sure I saw it as having to unlearn something. I did have to have a mindset shift in how I approach things. As an engineer, you're focused on solving problems yourself. As executive, you have to zoom out and understand how the entire business works, not just your function. And more importantly, you learn to get results through other people. It's no longer about being the expert in the room, but enabling the team to deliver. So it's I think it's just a shift in terms of how you approach what you do. And I think if you're one of those individuals where you like being that expert in the room and you like to solve the problem yourself, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Um, as I progressed through my career, I wanted to have more of a say in making decisions about what we did and how we did it. And so I made that shift.
Yeah. No, I mean, and then piggybacking off of what you were talking about, most people's fear is that when you rise in the organization, you lose that technical edge from your background. How did you really maintain that credibility in rooms where, you weren't viewed as like the deepest expert in this specific area anymore? How would you advise others to, make that transition?
Well, I don't see it as leaving technical behind. I see it as expanding how I apply it.
Mm-hmm.
You stay connected to the operation, spend time with the people doing the work and understand their challenges. My background enabled me to be able to not only have conversations with the engineers, but also with mechanics on the floor. And so I could understand their technical issues that they were seeing based on my background. So the engineering background gave me credibility. It shapes how I think and how I structure problem solving. But at the end of the day, I'm still a problem solver. I just have different problems I'm trying to solve.
Absolutely. And so last one in this section, as far as that that's a great term you use, expansion, right? And expanding your mindset, but still, you're still an active problem solver. You're just solving more problems that affect a lot more things, right? Instead of dB and ohms, it's customer satisfaction and
Right.
output, right? It's different, right? When did you realize that you were no longer being evaluated in terms of that, and now you were setting the standard? When did you realize that in your career?
When did I realize that? I really thought long and hard about this question. I don't think that moment ever really comes. Uh, in a corporate environment, I think you're always being evaluated no matter what your level. And if you think you're not, you will be reminded that you are. What does change is your responsibility. You're not just being measured, you're also setting standards for others. And looking back, I realized experience gives you something valuable to share, especially with emerging leaders and who are coming up behind you. So, unfortunately, you never get to that point where I've arrived. I don't know that that really exists.
I think Lillian, your last answer for our section 3 on talent and engagement was by far, it was amazing. I think as we shift into our next segment around people, culture, and scale, we're going to ask some more questions about training, things like that. One of the first questions I want to open up to you was, I know you've trained and developed thousands of people in your line of work. What actually works at scale versus what works and sounds good in theory?
I think what actually works at scale is relevance. Leadership development has to be tailored both to the organization and the individual. One size fits all, off the shelf programs, they sound good, but they really, in my opinion, deliver real impact. So I've seen the most benefit from using customized programs that work well for me are grounded in the business. They're tied to the real challenges we're having in the organization, and they're applied to how the work flows and in bites that the organization can absorb, not just a classroom. So, for example, you have an organization that you need to deliver this training. It comes in 3 8-hour segments. And in certain parts of the organization and operation, you don't want to pull people off the floor for 8 hours for 3 days. So you break that down into bite sized segments that they can absorb. It's not disruptive to their work, and you get them engaged for that period of time versus trying to force feed it in what works for the developer who produced the product. So I've had some good individuals I've worked with who, when you describe what you need it, how it needs to be delivered, you've done some maybe assessments with the leaders to identify competencies and capability gaps. It all gets rolled into a product that works for that group of individuals.
Absolutely. And it's all about that tailoring, tailoring to the company or organization where it needs to be. And I know with AI and analytics becoming more central these days, what is really that line between insight and overload? How do you teeter that line enough to you give enough information to people for them to digest?
That's a good question because I don't think any of us can go to any kind of a conference now and not hear AI mentioned in multiple presentations or panels. But I think the line between insight and overload really comes down to readiness. If people aren't ready, even good insight feels overwhelming. So I think the key is to start smart with some digital natives or early adopters, prove the value, and then build momentum. Because if you try to push too much too fast, especially with those resistant to change, it quickly turns into noise instead of
That's great.
impact.
That's great. That's great. So
Got it.
yeah, so we love it with all this goodness, but I this section here we're going to talk about something that was near and dear to both our hearts, and to me it's really like the legacy that you would love to leave behind, right? Leave for us, and Rob and I both stand on your shoulders, right, for what you have accomplished, and we were so excited to know that it was one of those moments like, hey, Lillian's going to come on. I was like, well, Lillian Dukes, really? Seriously? This is awesome. And, one of the questions that I wanted to ask is like, you've operated at some of the highest levels in our industry where representation of people that look like us was limited. And what did you have to carry that others didn't? As far as, just the responsibility. What I want to hear your words around that. Like, what did you have to carry?
Well, one thing to be careful about is not to carry a chip on your shoulder, because that can be easily done depending on the environment you're dealing with. I think there are environments where you are questioned sooner, where assumptions are made before you've even spoken, and before where you're even in the room. People make assumptions. Ignoring the reality doesn't help. So it's good to recognize that and accept it, and just decide for yourself how are you going to deal with it. What I learned is to build an undeniable competence. Be technically strong, prepared, understand the business end to end, and most importantly, make your impacts measurable. And sometimes coming out of engineering, the types of things we focus on aren't measurable. And I think as engineers, we've got to be more focused on making sure we can measure our value. I mean, you're not going to be able to control the bias, but you can control how you show up and how you execute. So for me, it's never been about proving my worth, even though sometimes it's felt like that. But it's about delivering results so consistently that the conversation shifts from assumptions to outcomes.
That's powerful. And I think this kind of gets into our next segment, next question around for the future leaders, like the Black engineers and leaders is listening. What's something they should stop doing immediately if they really want to make that change and rise up in the organizations that they're in?
Well, I'm getting on a little bit of the soapbox here.
We're there for it. That's right.
We're here for it.
Stop aiming for good enough. Master your craft. Mentors and sponsors are critical. They help you see around corners. They open doors that you can't access on your own. So if you're hanging out with a lonesome wolf, stop doing that. Your results matter, but they're even more powerful when the right people see and advocate for you. I'm wearing it today because of mentors and sponsors who have helped me throughout my entire career.
I learned this term via a training I just been through, a educational journey called the African American Leadership Academy here in Charlotte. And the big term they were teaching us was social capital, right? Not only building a relationship, but how to really use it, right? To not only just, hey, I know somebody, but I've known somebody and added value, and they've added value back to me, right? And that's something that definitely that we need to start sharing, with our basically with our engineers and folks to really understand on what that looks like and give them a framework around that thing. So one other question before we close out, right? You mentor a lot of people, and we talked about it right now. So what separates the ones who actually break through from the ones who stay stuck?
What I've seen separates a number of them is commitment. The ones who break through take ownership of the relationship. They stay engaged, they follow through. The ones who get stuck let those relationships fade, and they try to go it alone. And that rarely works. So mentorship isn't passive. The people who grow treat it as a partnership and invest in it consistently.
So many gems that were dropped here. It's hard to summarize everything that you said, but it hit on so many good points from industry executives like yourself and ones that are up and coming in the organization, like myself and Dwayne. We're in the journey in the long run in this aerospace industry. So, like Lillian said earlier, we're standing here because of the work that you paved in our career journeys thus far. So I wholeheartedly appreciate you stopping by just to have a chat with us as we start this journey about interviewing other leaders like yourself in the industry. I think it's wonderful what you've done, what you've actually shared with our listeners today. I think one last question that I just want to ask you, what do you want your leadership to have built that outlasts you as you're reflecting on your career journey thus far?
I think you can hear what I say. I talk a lot about people. And I want my leadership to be measured by the impact that I had on people, especially the leaders that were able to grow along the way. Strategies and transformations will come and go. What lasts is how people experience the work and what they became because of it. For many, before transformations, their work was feeling frustrating, like they were not set up to win. And most people don't come to work to fail. But we have these environments that cause them to be in that situation. So when you can create an environment where people feel successful, where the business is performing, and and they know they're contributing, that changes everything. So because when people enjoy what they do and feel like they're winning, performance follows. And that's the kind of impact that lasts well behind any one initiative.
It's all about the people, Lillian.
Absolutely.
Lillian, we just want to thank you for taking the time and participating with us. Is there anything that you want to share with our audience on how, what things you're working on that's really cool, and or even a better question that Rob and I want to ask you personally is like, how can we help you in your new journey and where you are, and what things can we do to help you? If you got an answer, we would love to participate and see what next great things and be a part of that, what you have. Definitely want to make sure that we stay connected and knowing the good things that you're going to be doing, the great things you're going to be doing.
Absolutely. Well, we help organization achieve strategic goals in 3 ways. First, through LAC Consulting, I partner with AI specialists to bring advanced, well, tongue twister there, analytics into supply chain procurement, starting with a focused proof of concept to validate ROI before scale. Second, I work with a performance-focused partner to turn strategy into results by embedding experienced coaches alongside the leadership teams to strengthen the execution and their accountability. And third, I independently coach senior leaders to expand their enterprise impact. At the end of the day, the real transformation starts with listening and succeeds when strategy, technology, and people can all evolve together.
That's it in a nutshell. Absolutely. Well, we're going to make sure we get all your information and make sure it's posted on all our socials. And Lillian, just thank you so much.